The roar of 10,000 wolves shook the stone walls of the Crimson Arena. Seraphine pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the eastern colonnade, her heart slamming against her ribs as she watched the ceremony unfold below. Above her, the crowd stamped their feet and howled with anticipation as the final event of the proving tournament approached. The moment when Alpha King Kalen would announce his chosen mate before the assembled packs of Velmora. She should not have come. Every instinct screamed at her to flee back to the servants' passage, to disappear into the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the arena where she had hidden for 2 days, waiting for Kalen's message. But no message had come. No whispered reassurance. No secret signal that their plan remained unchanged. Only silence. And so she had come to see for herself, slipping into the arena in the one form no one would question, the small silver creature that now sat obediently in the shadows, its pale fur catching the torchlight. Her other form? Her shame. A guard patrolling the colonnade paused, his nostrils flaring. His gaze swept the shadows and found her, or rather, found the small silver wolf crouched behind the pillar. He snorted with contempt. "That's just a pet," he muttered to his companion. "Some servant's lapdog, probably lost. Hardly worth the effort to chase out." They moved on, laughing. Seraphine's claws dug into the stone. Lapdog. Pet. The words she had heard her entire life. The words she prayed Kalen would help her forget forever. Among wolf kind, the size and power of one's shifted form reflected the strength of one's bloodline. Seraphine's wolf was barely larger than a common dog, with fur the color of moonlit snow and eyes of liquid amber. Since childhood she had been mocked for it. Runt. Defect. Pet. But Kalen had never seen her that way. "Your wolf is beautiful," he had whispered the first night they met in the moonlit gardens behind the castle. "Different does not mean lesser, Seraphine. It means rare." She had not believed him, not until he had pressed his lips to the crescent-shaped mark on her inner wrist, the secret claiming bite he had given her 3 months ago, hidden where no one would see. "When the tournament ends," he had promised, his amber eyes blazing with sincerity, "I will announce you as my true mate. The council wants a political alliance, but I want you. Only you. Nothing in this realm will change that." She had believed every word. Now, crouched in the shadows with her hand pressed against her still flat belly, she prayed she had not been a fool. The crowd fell silent as a figure ascended the central dais. Kalen. Even from this distance, Seraphine felt the bond between them pulse with warmth. He stood tall in ceremonial black and crimson, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by the old gods themselves. The raw power radiating from him made lesser wolves bow their heads without conscious thought. But something was wrong. His movements were stiff, mechanical, lacking the fluid grace she knew intimately. And his eyes, those amber eyes that had burned with passion when he looked at her, seemed flat, distant, empty as a winter sky. "He is nervous," she told herself. "The weight of the kingdom watches him. He must play his part until the moment is right." "The candidates will now approach." High Chancellor Morkan's voice rang across the arena. Seraphine's claws, her wolf's claws, for she remained shifted, scraped against stone as 4 women in flowing white gowns ascended the dais steps. Daughters of the great houses, each one tall and beautiful and powerful. Each one with a wolf form that could tear through armies. And at their center, moving with predatory grace, walked Ravenna of House Moravian. The crowd murmured with approval. The Moravans controlled the eastern territories, commanded 5,000 warriors, and had been positioning their daughter for this moment since before Seraphine was born. Ravenna's wolf form was legendary. Black as pitch, massive as a warhorse, with eyes like burning coals. Everything Seraphine's wolf was not. Kalen, Alpha King of Velmora, blood of the first pack, Chancellor Morkant intoned. "The realm has witnessed the trials. The candidates have proven their worth. Now, you must choose." "Look at me," Seraphine begged silently. "Find me in the crowd. Give me any sign that our bond still holds." The mark on her wrist flared with sudden heat. Kaelin's head turned slightly, almost imperceptibly, toward the eastern archway. Hope surged through her chest. And then his gaze slid past, empty and unseeing, as if she did not exist. "I have made my decision," Kaelin said. His voice was wrong, hollow, a tomb sealed shut. "I choose Ravenna of House Moraven as my mate and future queen." The arena exploded. Howls of celebration shook the ancient stones. Nobles embraced. Warriors stamped their approval. The political alliance that would secure Velmora's eastern border had been achieved. And Seraphine felt her world shatter into 1,000 pieces. The mark on her wrist burned with searing, impossible pain. She yelped, a high animal sound, and stumbled backward, her small wolf form colliding with the archway wall. This was not the warmth of connection. This was agony, as if Kaelin's claiming bite was being ripped from her flesh by invisible claws. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched him take Ravenna's hand, watched him raise it to his lips in the ritual gesture of acceptance. Watched the woman smile with triumph while the man Seraphine loved showed nothing at all. No hesitation, no recognition, no sign that he remembered promising his heart to a servant girl with a wolf too small to matter. A whimper escaped her throat, lost in the cacophony of celebration. She ran. Her small paws carried her through the servants' tunnels, through the winding passages beneath the arena, through the castle corridors she had memorized during stolen nights with Kaelin. The pain in her wrist pulsed with every heartbeat, a relentless reminder of her humiliation. Pregnant. The word surfaced through her grief like a blade. She was carrying his child. She had been waiting for tonight to tell him, after the ceremony, when he came to her chambers as he always did. She had imagined his joy, his protective embrace, the way he would press his hand to her belly and swear to love them both forever. Now she imagined only his empty eyes and the sound of Ravenna's triumphant laughter. Seraphine reached her tiny chamber in the servants' quarters and shifted back to human form with a gasp. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely gather her belongings. A few dresses, her mother's ring, the herbs she had begun taking for the nausea that plagued her mornings. She paused at the small window. Celebration bonfires were being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that arena, Kaelin was accepting congratulations for his wise political choice. Ravenna was probably already planning the mating ceremony, and no one, not a single soul in all of Velmora, knew that the Alpha King's true mate was fleeing into the night with his heir growing inside her. Seraphine touched her wrist where the claiming mark still burned. "You promised," she whispered to the darkness. "You swore I was your heart." Then she pulled her cloak tight, shifted back into her small silver form, and slipped through a gap in the castle wall that only a creature her size could fit through. Behind her, the celebration howls continued. She did not see the figure watching from the royal balcony above the arena. She did not see the amber eyes that flickered, just for a moment, with desperate, confused awareness. And she did not hear the raw, broken sound that tore from Kaelin's throat as something inside him screamed that he had just lost everything that mattered, though he could not remember why. By the time the Alpha King clawed his way free of the fog in his mind, Seraphine's chamber was empty. The only trace of her was a single silver hair on the pillow, and a scent that made his wolf howl with grief he did not understand. 4 months later, the village of Ashwick had mostly forgotten about the strange woman who had arrived in the dead of winter. She called herself Wren, a small, plain name for a small, plain creature. The village elders had taken pity on the young widow with haunted eyes and a belly just beginning to swell, offering her the abandoned healer's cottage at the edge of the thornwood in exchange for her services. Seraphine had accepted without hesitation. Now spring was struggling to emerge through the last stubborn snows, and she had become simply the healer woman who lived where the forest met the fields. She set broken bones. She brewed tonics for fever. She delivered babies with steady hands and a gentle voice. And every night, she lay awake with her palms pressed to her growing belly, feeling the child move within her. Strong, she thought, strong like your father. The thought of Kaylin still sent pain lancing through her chest. 4 months, and the wound had not begun to heal. If anything, it had grown worse, a constant ache that followed her into sleep and greeted her upon waking. But it was the mark that truly frightened her. Seraphine examined her wrist by candlelight, tracing the crescent shape that should have faded months ago. When a mate bond was broken, when one party rejected the other, the claiming mark was supposed to disappear within weeks. The flesh would heal smooth and blank, as if the bond had never existed. Instead, her mark had darkened. The scar tissue was now a deep silver, almost luminescent in certain light. It pulsed with heat when the wind blew from the south, from the direction of the capital. And sometimes, in the small hours of the night, she could swear she felt something through it. A presence, a searching, a desperate, clawing need that was not her own. But that was impossible. Kaylin had chosen another, had publicly claimed another. The bond between them should have shattered the moment Ravenna's name left his lips, unless he never truly chose her at all. Seraphine crushed the traitorous thought before it could take root. False hope was a poison more deadly than anything in her healer's stores. A knock at her door made her jump. Mistress Wren, young Thomas, the miller's son, stood on her threshold with snow in his hair and excitement in his eyes. "Travelers have come from the capital. They carry news." Seraphine's chest tightened. "What news?" "The Alpha King." Thomas practically vibrated with the thrill of gossip. "They say he has gone mad." The world tilted beneath her feet. She gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. "Mad?" she managed. Thomas nodded vigorously. "The travelers say he has torn apart half the kingdom searching for someone, a woman. No one knows who she is or what she did, only that the king has become a terror. He has not slept in months. He shifts without warning and runs through the forests for days. His own advisors fear to be near him." Seraphine's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked sharply, as if responding to the mention of its father. "There is more," Tomas continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "They say the bond with Lady Ravenna was never completed. She remains at the castle, but the king has not touched her, has not even spoken to her since the night of the tournament. Some say she weeps in her chambers. Others say she plots revenge. Never completed." The words echoed through Seraphine's mind. A mate bond required consummation to seal fully. If Kaylin had not touched Ravenna in 4 months, if the bond between them remained incomplete, then technically, in the eyes of Wolflaw, he had no true mate at all. But why? If he had chosen Ravenna willingly, why would he refuse to complete what he had started? "The king has offered a reward," Tomas added, 20,000 gold pieces for any information about the woman he seeks. They say he described her to every wolf in the realm. Small wolf form, silver fur, amber eyes." Seraphine stopped breathing, and a crescent-shaped mark on her inner wrist. The door slammed before Tomas could say another word. Seraphine stood with her back pressed against the wood, her chest heaving, her mind racing. He was searching for her, offering a fortune for her, describing her mark, her hidden mark, to every wolf in the kingdom. Why would he search for a woman he had publicly discarded? Unless something had been terribly, terribly wrong that night. Movement outside her window caught her eye. Seraphine's blood drained from her face. A shape stood at the edge of the thornwood. Large, 4-legged, fur the color of dried blood in the fading light. A wolf. And not a village wolf. This one was massive, easily twice the size of any natural beast, with eyes that gleamed with unmistakable intelligence. As she watched, frozen with terror, another emerged beside it. Then another. Then three more. 6 wolves, arranged in a hunting formation, their gazes fixed on her cottage. They had found her. The mark on her wrist exploded with heat. Seraphine gasped, doubling over as the searing sensation radiated up her arm. This was not the dull burn she had grown accustomed to. This was fire. This was a beacon blazing to life. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence. Massive, desperate, familiar, pushing against the edges of her consciousness. Seraphine. Her name, but not spoken aloud. Felt. Through the bond that should not exist anymore. Where are you? Where are you? The baby kicked violently, once, twice, 3 times. And through the trees behind the watching wolves, Seraphine saw more shapes emerging. Not wolves this time. Men. Armed men in black leather armor, their faces hidden behind iron masks. Her hand flew to her belly as the truth crashed over her like a winter avalanche. 2 groups had found her. One was searching, the other was hunting. And she was trapped between them with nowhere to run. The knock at her door was calm, almost polite. Somehow, that made it worse. Seraphine grabbed the iron poker from beside her hearth, though she knew it would do little against trained wolves. Her mind raced through options: the root cellar, the back window, the narrow gap in the cottage wall that only her small wolf form could squeeze through. But the child made her slower now, heavier, the shift more difficult to maintain. Mistress Wren. A male voice, deep and weathered with age. Please, we mean you no harm. We have been sent by someone who has torn himself apart searching for you. Her grip on the poker tightened. My name is Dristan, the voice continued. First Beta to Alpha King Kalen. And I swear on my bloodline that if you open this door, I will explain everything. First Beta, the king's most trusted warrior, his second in command. Either this was an elaborate trap, or something had gone very wrong in the capital. Seraphine took a breath and opened the door. 3 figures stood on her threshold. 2 were clearly warriors, young, alert, their massive frames filling the doorway. But it was the 3rd man who commanded her attention. Dristan was old for a wolf. His dark hair shot through with silver, his face weathered by decades of service. But his eyes, a deep amber that reminded her painfully of Kalen, held something she had not expected. Relief. Staggering, overwhelming relief. Thank the old gods, he breathed. You are alive. You are alive, and you are... His gaze dropped to her swollen belly. His expression shifted to something like awe. Carrying the royal air. I do not know what you are talking about, Seraphine said, keeping her voice flat. My name is Wren. I am a simple healer. The child belongs to my late husband. You are Seraphine, formerly of the castle servants. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left wrist. And that child? Dristan's voice cracked. That child is the only hope we have of saving him. Saving him? Seraphine could not keep the bitter edge from her voice. Last I saw, your king was quite well, choosing his perfect political mate before 10,000 cheering wolves. That was not the king. The words hung in the cold air. Seraphine stared at him. I was there. I watched him speak. I watched him take her hand. You watched his body perform actions his mind did not command. Dristan's jaw tightened. The night of the tournament, someone slipped a compound into his wine. Wolfsbane refined with blackthorn and other herbs our healers still cannot identify. It severed his connection to his wolf, suppressed his instincts, his memories, and his bond. The poker trembled in Seraphine's grip. For 3 days, he moved through the world like a puppet with cut strings, Drystan continued. He ate when food was placed before him. He spoke when questions were asked. He accepted Ravenna's hand because the words were fed to him by Chancellor Morcant, who we now know has been in House Moraven's pocket for years. No. Seraphine shook her head. That is impossible. A wolf cannot be. When he woke on the fourth day, he remembered nothing. Drystan's voice hardened. Nothing of the ceremony, nothing of choosing Ravenna. The first word he spoke was your name. The first thing he did was run to find you. And when your chamber was empty, he did not need to finish. Seraphine's knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe, her mind reeling with the implications. Drugged. He had been drugged. The empty eyes, the mechanical movements, the complete lack of recognition. It had not been betrayal. It had been violation. House Moraven has been planning this for years, Drystan said grimly. They knew about you, about the secret claiming. They could not allow a servant girl to take the throne they had been positioning Ravenna for since birth, so they took matters into their own hands. If this is true, Seraphine whispered, why did he not simply denounce Ravenna? Declare the choosing void? Because there is no proof. The drug left no trace. Chancellor Morcant claims the king was merely nervous that night, that his behavior was well within normal bounds. 10,000 wolves witnessed him speak the words of acceptance. To declare the choosing void without evidence would be to admit that the Alpha King's mind can be controlled. Drystan's expression was bleak. It would be blood in the water. Every ambitious house in the realm would see weakness. Civil war would follow within months. Seraphine closed her eyes. She had spent 4 months believing she had been discarded, cast aside for a political alliance. She had nursed her grief and her anger and her wounded pride, while Kaelin had been, what? Trapped in a political nightmare not of his making? Searching for her while the kingdom crumbled around him? He has not slept, Drystan said quietly. 4 months, and he has not truly slept. His wolf fights for dominance every hour of every day. The bond with you, incomplete, unbroken, is the only thing keeping him from going fully feral. He feels you through it, feels that you are alive, but he cannot find you, and the uncertainty is destroying him. A sound escaped her throat. Not quite a sob. Not quite a laugh. Why are you telling me this? She demanded. If he needs me so badly, why has he not come himself? Drystan reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. Because we intercepted this 3 days ago. We do not know how many copies exist, or how close the threat already is. Seraphine took the letter with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but she could see the Moravian crest, a black wolf devouring a crescent moon, pressed into dark wax. The message inside was brief. The false mate has been located in Ashwick Village. The contract has been accepted. Eliminate the woman and the bastard she carries before the next full moon. Leave no evidence. House Moravin's gratitude will be substantial. The paper fluttered from her fingers. Assassins, she breathed. Professional hunters, Drystan confirmed. Expensive, ruthless. They will not stop until... A howl split the evening air. Not from Drystan's wolves, from the forest behind her cottage. Drystan was moving before the sound faded, shoving Seraphine back into the cottage as his 2 warriors exploded into wolf form. They are already here. Get to the cellar, now! There is no way out from the cellar, Seraphine protested. You only need to survive until reinforcements arrive. The king is less than an hour behind us. Her heart stopped. He is coming here? He has been running south for 3 days straight. Following the bond, following you. Drystan drew a long blade from his belt. Whatever happens, do not come out until you hear my voice, or his. He shifted mid-stride, his body exploding into a massive gray wolf that crashed through her door and into the night. Seraphine stood frozen in her ruined doorway. Through the shattered frame, she could see chaos erupting. Drystan's wolves clashing with dark shapes that moved with deadly precision. The flash of silver blades, silver, the metal that could kill a wolf with a single wound. The sickening sound of combat. And advancing through the mayhem, untouched by the battle around him, walked a figure in black leather armor with an iron mask shaped like a snarling wolf. His crossbow was raised. His bolt was aimed directly at her heart. Seraphine's hand flew to her belly as time seemed to slow. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger, and then her mark blazed with light. Not heat this time. Actual, visible, golden light pouring from the crescent scar on her wrist like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The assassin hesitated, his aim faltering at the impossible sight. And from the depths of the thornwood came a sound that shook the earth itself. A howl of such fury, such primal rage, that every wolf in the clearing, friend and enemy alike, froze in instinctive terror. Something was coming through the forest, something massive, something that was done waiting. The creature that exploded from the thornwood was unlike anything Seraphine had ever seen. A wolf? Yes, but a wolf the size of a small horse, its fur black as a moonless night, its eyes blazing with molten amber fire. Power radiated from it in waves that pressed against her skin like physical weight. Every wolf in the clearing, Drystan's warriors, the Moravian assassins, even the masked hunter with the crossbow, cowered before its presence. This was no ordinary alpha. This was something ancient, something primal, something that had been pushed beyond the boundaries of reason by 4 months of unrelenting anguish. The masked assassin recovered first, swinging his crossbow toward the new threat. He never completed the motion. The black wolf moved with speed that defied comprehension, crossing the distance between them in a single heartbeat. Its jaws closed around the assassin's arm with a sickening crunch of bone. The man screamed, a high, terrible sound, as the beast shook him like a child's doll and flung him into the darkness. The remaining assassins broke formation. One fled toward the forest. The black wolf caught him before he made it 3 strides, its massive paw slamming him into the frozen earth with enough force to crack stone. Another tried to shift, his body rippling with the change, but the beast was faster, its teeth finding his throat before fur could fully emerge. It was not a battle. It was annihilation. Seraphine watched from her doorway, one hand pressed to her belly, unable to move, unable to breathe. The mark on her wrist pulsed with heat that matched the golden fire in the beast's eyes. She knew those eyes. The black wolf finished with the last assassin and turned in a slow circle, searching for more threats. Finding none, its massive head swung toward her cottage, toward her. It approached slowly, each step deliberate, its breath misting in the cold air. Blood dripped from its muzzle. Gore matted its dark fur. It looked like death incarnate, a nightmare given flesh. And yet, when it finally stood before her, it lowered its great head and pressed its nose gently to her swollen belly. The baby kicked. Hard. Twice. The beast made a sound that shattered her heart. A whimper, soft and broken, so at odds with the violence it had just unleashed that tears sprang to her eyes unbidden. "Kaelin," she whispered. The shift happened between one breath and the next. One moment, a monster stood before her. The next, a man knelt in the blood-soaked snow, his hands hovering over her stomach as if he was terrified to touch her. He looked up. The Alpha King of Velmora was weeping. 4 months of searching. 4 months of sleepless nights and feral runs through endless forests. 4 months of feeling her through a bond that should not exist, knowing she was alive but never able to find her. And now she stood before him, real and whole, and carrying his child, and Kaelin could not seem to remember how to speak. "You are alive," he finally managed, his voice raw as an open wound. You are alive, and you are— His eyes dropped to her belly again. His hand reached toward it, then stopped, trembling. May I? The question broke something inside her. This was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms. He had just torn through a squad of professional assassins like they were made of parchment. And he was asking permission to touch his own child. Seraphine took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The baby responded immediately, kicking against his palm with surprising force. Kalen made a choked sound, his fingers spreading wide to feel more, his eyes squeezing shut as tears streamed down his face. A child, he breathed. Our child. Seraphine, why— His voice cracked. Why did you not tell me? The question fractured the spell. Seraphine stepped backward, pulling away from his touch. The warmth of the moment dissolved into the cold reality of everything that had happened between them. Tell you? She heard the sharp edge in her own voice and did not try to soften it. When should I have done that, Kaylin? Before or after you chose Ravenna before 10,000 witnesses? He flinched as if she had struck him. I did not choose her. I would never. I was there. The words tore from her throat, carrying 4 months of grief and rage. I watched you speak her name. I watched you take her hand. I watched you look through me like I was nothing while I stood in the shadows with your child growing inside me. Seraphine, please. Kalen rose to his feet, his hands reaching for her. I was drugged. Drystan told you. The Moravins poisoned me. I remember nothing of that night except waking 3 days later with your scent fading from my chambers and my wolf screaming that something precious had been stolen. How convenient, she spat, even as her heart cracked at the agony in his eyes. Convenient? His voice hardened, and for a moment she saw the alpha beneath the grief, the king who commanded armies and bent lesser wolves to his will with a glance. You think any part of this has been convenient? I have spent 4 months hunting for you. 4 months fighting my wolf for control every hour of every day. 4 months watching my kingdom fracture, while I searched every village, every forest, every forgotten corner of the realm for the mate who vanished without a word of explanation. Because you rejected me. Because I was violated. The roar shook the trees. The word hung between them, terrible and true. Do you think I chose this? Kalen's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, more devastating than his shout. Do you think I wanted to wake up bound by witnessed oath to a woman I despise while the woman I love was gone? While our bond was screaming in my chest and I had no idea if you were alive or dead? His voice broke on the last word. Seraphine's anger faltered. The bond. She had felt it too, every day of her exile. The mark that should have faded but never did. The ache that followed her into sleep. The sense of him searching, always searching. Like a distant fire she could never quite reach. I thought you had thrown me away, she whispered. I thought everything you said was lies, that I was just a convenient distraction until you were forced to choose someone worthy of your crown. Kalen closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are worthy of everything, he said fiercely. You are my mate, my true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would give that up for politics? For power? For anything in this world or any other? A sob escaped her throat. I waited for you, she choked out. That night. I waited in my chamber for you to come to me. I was going to tell you about the baby. I had practiced the words for hours. Seraphine. And when you did not come, I went to find you. Instead, I found you choosing her. Speaking her name. Looking at her like she was your future while I hid in the shadows with your air in my belly. She pounded her fist against his chest, but there was no strength behind the blow. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Kalen caught her wrist, the one with the claiming mark, and pressed her palm flat against his chest. Yes, he said quietly. I know exactly what it felt like. Because I have spent every moment since that night living with the knowledge that I failed you, that something was done to me that made me betray the most important person in my existence. His pulse hammered beneath her hand, strong and steady and achingly familiar. I have not touched Ravenna, Kaelin continued. I have not completed the bond. I have not even been in the same room as her without guards present since I regained my senses. The council threatens rebellion. Half the noble houses have withdrawn their support. They believe I have gone mad. He laughed bitterly. Perhaps I have, but I would burn Velmora to ashes before I let anyone but you sit beside me on that throne. The mark on her wrist flared with warmth. Not pain this time, but something deeper. His claim on her, incomplete as it was, resonating with something in her soul that had never stopped reaching for him. The Moravins sent assassins, she heard herself say. They want me dead. Kaelin's eyes hardened to molten gold. Then House Moravin will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate and my child. A groan from the clearing interrupted them. Dryston limped toward them in human form, his body bearing the marks of battle. My king, my lady. The assassins are dealt with, but this was only the first wave. The Moravins will send more when these fail to report. Then we move tonight, Kaelin said. Seraphine comes with me. The Moravins answer for their crimes before the full moon rises. Seraphine wanted to protest, wanted to argue that she was in no condition to travel, that the baby needed rest, that she was not ready to face the court that had watched her love choose another. But when Kaelin looked at her, his golden eyes soft with tenderness beneath the steel, she found she could not refuse him anything. Together? She asked quietly. Kaelin pressed his forehead to hers, and through the bond she felt his answer before he spoke it. A wave of fierce devotion that stole her breath. Always, my heart. From this moment until my last breath. Together. The journey to the capital should have taken 3 days. Kaelin's wolves made it in 1. Seraphine rode before the Alpha King on his massive black warhorse, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the biting wind. She had protested at first. She was not some fragile flower to be carried. But Kaelin had simply lifted her onto the saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. My wolf needs you close, he had said, his voice rough with emotion. 4 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my sight until the bond is completed and every threat to our family is eliminated. So Seraphine had relented, leaning back against his chest and feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The baby seemed to approve of the arrangement, settling into peaceful stillness for the first time in weeks. As they rode through the night, Kaelin told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Ravenna in his chambers, attempting to complete a bond he had no memory of accepting. About the horror that had flooded through him when he realized what had been done. About throwing Ravenna from his rooms and ordering her confined while he searched for answers that seemed determined to remain hidden. He told her about the search that had consumed every waking moment since, the wolves sent to every corner of the kingdom, the sleepless nights spent poring over maps and reports. The way his control had frayed with each passing day until his own advisors feared to be in the same room with him. My wolf knew you were alive, he murmured against her hair. The bond never fully broke. Every time I tried to accept that you might be gone forever, I would feel a pulse of warmth through the mark I gave you, and I knew. I knew you were out there somewhere, waiting for me to find you. Seraphine's hand moved to cover his where it rested on her belly. I felt it too, she admitted. The burn that never faded. The dreams that felt more real than waking. Kaelin stiffened. You dreamed of me? Every night. You came to me in a moonlit clearing. You spoke words I could not quite hear but somehow understood. You told me you loved me, that you would find me, and that nothing would keep us apart. Those were not dreams. His voice was hoarse. My wolf, When I slept, he would reach for you through the bond. I thought I was merely imagining comfort, but you actually felt—" He trailed off, overcome. Seraphine turned in the saddle to look at him. In the silver moonlight she could see the shadows under his eyes, the gauntness of his cheeks, the evidence of 4 months of suffering etched into every line of his face. "We have both been through so much," she whispered. "Apart when we should have been together." Kaylin's hand came up to cup her face. "Never again," he vowed. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one." He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and questioning. But when Seraphine's hand curled around the back of his neck, pulling him closer, something ignited between them. The bond roared to life. She gasped against his mouth as sensation flooded through her. His emotions crashed into hers with overwhelming force. Love, desperate and all-consuming. Desire, barely held in check. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kaylin's eyes blazed gold in the darkness. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough with restrained need. "When you are safe. When our enemies are destroyed. I will complete the bond properly, and you will never doubt my devotion again." They reached the outskirts of the capital as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The city of Valdros spread before them, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens like grasping claws. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from several quarters of the city. The distant sound of shouting reached their ears. And on the great banner that flew above the castle gates, the royal crest of House Valdrin had been replaced by a black wolf devouring a crescent moon. The sigil of House Moravin. "No," Drystan breathed from beside them. "They would not dare." Kaylin's arm tightened around Seraphine as a growl built in his chest. "They have taken the castle." "How is that possible?" Seraphine demanded. "You have been gone barely 2 days. The Moravins have been planning this for years, perhaps decades. They did not just want me to marry Ravenna." His voice was cold as winter steel. "They wanted to replace me entirely." A rider emerged from the city gates, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Kaylin's scouts, her face ashen with fear. "My king," she gasped, reining her horse to a skidding halt. The Moravins struck at midnight. They had allies within the guard, dozens of them. "Lord Moravin has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone feral and must be put down for the safety of the realm. Lady Ravenna has been named queen." A snarl tore from Kaylin's throat, and Seraphine felt his wolf surge toward the surface. "There is more." The scout's voice trembled. "They have taken hostages. The servants who remained loyal to you. The guards who refused to kneel. They are to be executed at noon in the Great Hall as traitors to the crown." "How many?" Drystan demanded. 43, including—" The scout's eyes flickered to Seraphine. "Including the old healer woman who served in the servants' quarters, the one called Mira. They say she helped someone flee the castle the night of the tournament." Mira. The name struck Seraphine like a physical blow. Mira, who had brought her extra blankets when she was cold. Who had covered for her absences when she slipped away to meet Kaylin. Who had pressed a package of dried herbs into her hands the night she fled, whispering, "For the sickness that comes with new life. Be safe, little one." Mira had known, had always known, and had never breathed a word. "We have to save them," Seraphine said fiercely. Kaylin looked down at her, his expression torn. "Seraphine, you cannot enter that city. If the Moravins capture you, if we do nothing, 43 innocent people die. I will not have their blood on my hands." She met his gaze without flinching. "I will not let Mira die because she was kind to me." For a long moment the Alpha King was silent. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Something fierce, something proud. My queen, he murmured. Even now you think of others before yourself. He turned to address the army of wolves assembled behind them. The Moravans believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded, that their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne. His voice rang across the gathered warriors like a war horn. They are wrong. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, hundreds of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. Today, we take back what is ours. Today, we show the traitors what happens to those who threaten their true king, their true queen, and the heir she carries. The army surged forward, a tide of fur and fang and righteous rage, and at its head, with his mate held close against his heart, the Alpha King rode to reclaim his throne. The battle for Valdros was brutal and swift. The Moravans had expected resistance. They had not expected an army of wolves driven by 4 months of pent-up fury and the primal need to protect their king's mate and unborn heir. Seraphine watched from a protected position on the hillside as Kaelin led the charge. Even from this distance, she could feel his rage through the bond, a blazing inferno that scorched through her veins. His wolf form was terrible to behold, a shadow of death that tore through Moravan defenders like they were made of straw. Within an hour, the outer walls had fallen. Within 2, the castle gates lay in splinters. But as the sun climbed toward its noon peak, a messenger came running with news that made her stomach clench with dread. My lady, Lord Moravan has barricaded himself in the great hall with the hostages. He says if the king does not surrender himself for execution, he will kill them all, starting with the old healer woman. Seraphine was moving before she consciously decided to, ignoring the protests of the guards Kaelin had left to protect her. Her body ached from the journey, her back screamed with the strain of carrying the child. But none of that mattered. She had to reach the great hall. The castle corridors were chaos. Bodies littered the stone floors. The scent of blood and smoke hung thick in the air. But Seraphine pushed through it all, following the pull of the bond toward where she knew Kaelin would be. She found him at the doors of the great hall, held back by Drystan and 4 other wolves. You cannot go in there, Dristan was saying. It is exactly what Moravan wants. A public execution of the Alpha King to legitimize his coup. If I do nothing, 43 people die, Kaelin snarled. Kaelin! He spun at the sound of her voice, his expression shifting from fury to alarm. Seraphine, what are you doing here? I told you to stay. I know what you told me. She stopped before him, chin raised. And I am telling you that I will not hide while others die in my place. This is not your fight. It became my fight the moment the Moravans decided I was an obstacle to their ambitions. Seraphine placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. And it became my fight the moment I fell in love with you. Kaelin's breath caught. In all their months together, through all their whispered conversations and stolen moments, neither of them had spoken those words aloud. Seraphine, he whispered. I love you, she repeated, stronger now. I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 4 months of exile and heartbreak. And I will not let that love make me a coward now. She turned toward the great hall doors before he could respond. Lord Moravan, she called out, her voice carrying through the ancient wood. I am Seraphine, the woman your family has tried so hard to destroy. I am coming in, alone. Seraphine, no! Kaelin grabbed her arm. She looked back at him, letting him feel her certainty through the bond. Trust me, please. Something passed between them. Not words, but understanding. Faith. And beneath it all, a desperate prayer. Kaelin released her arm. Seraphine pushed open the doors and stepped into the great hall. The scene inside was worse than she had imagined. 43 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound and their faces pale with terror. Armed Moravan soldiers stood behind them with silver blades drawn, blades that could kill a wolf with a single cut. And on the throne that belonged to Kaelin sat Lord Aldrich Morrivan, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his smile cold as a winter grave. Beside him stood Ravenna. "So this is the creature that has caused so much trouble?" Ravenna said, her lip curling with contempt. "A servant girl with a swollen belly and a wolf too pathetic to matter." She laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "They told me you were a runt, a pet. I see the rumors were generous." Seraphine ignored her. Her gaze swept across the hostages until she found Mira, the old healer who had shown her kindness when no one else had. Mira's face was bruised, her gray hair matted with blood, but her eyes were fierce. "Run, child," Mira whispered. "Run while you still can." "I am done running." Seraphine turned to face Lord Morrivan. "You want the king to surrender? I am offering you something better." Morrivan's eyebrow rose. "And what might that be?" "Me." She placed her hand on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heir, the greatest threat to your daughter's claim. Take me as your hostage instead. Release the others." "No!" The roar came from beyond the doors. Through the bond, Seraphine felt Kaelin's anguish like shattered glass in her veins, but Morrivan was already smiling. "How touching! The little pet offers herself to save the cattle." He stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Very well. I accept your terms." "Father, no." Ravenna's voice was sharp with alarm. "We should simply kill her now and be done with it." "Patience, daughter. A dead hostage has no value. A living one, especially one carrying the royal heir, can be used to control the king for years." Morrivan waved a hand. "Guards, release the prisoners. Secure the girl." The hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors in confused relief. Mira tried to reach Seraphine, but soldiers shoved her back with the others. As rough hands grabbed Seraphine's arms, she felt strangely calm. "Trust me," she sent through the bond. "Whatever happens next, trust me." Kaelin's response was a storm of denial and fear, but beneath it, she felt him force himself to stillness, to wait, to trust. Lord Morrivan descended from the throne, approaching her with the casual arrogance of a man who believed he had already won. "Do you know what your mistake was, girl?" He circled her slowly like a wolf examining wounded prey. "You thought your bond with the king made you special, made you untouchable. But bonds can be severed. Wolves can be controlled. And runts?" He laughed softly. "Runts can be put down." He drew a dagger from his belt, silver-edged, poison-coated. "The king is listening at those doors," Morrivan continued. "He will hear you die. He will feel it through that precious bond of yours. And when his grief drives him to madness, my wolves will put him down like the rabid beast he has become." He raised the blade. "Any last words, pet?" Seraphine smiled. "Just 3. The power she had kept suppressed her entire life, the gift she had been told to hide, to fear, to be ashamed of, rose in her chest like a tide finally unleashed. "I am not a pet." Golden light exploded from her body. But this was not the healing glow she had used in the forest. This was something else. Something older. Something that had been sleeping in her blood since birth, waiting for the moment when she would stop being afraid of what she truly was. The transformation began. Pain lanced through her, but not the agony of a forced shift. This was release. Liberation. Every bone in her body sang with the rightness of it as her form began to change. She had spent her whole life believing her wolf was small because she was weak, defective, lesser. She had been wrong. Her wolf was small because it had been waiting. Waiting for the bond with her true mate to be forged. Waiting for his child to grow in her womb. Waiting for the moment when she would finally accept herself, all of herself, without shame. The golden light intensified until the great hall blazed like the heart of a sun. When it faded, Seraphine was gone. In her place stood a wolf. not the small dog-sized creature that had earned her a lifetime of mockery. This wolf was massive, larger than Ravenna's legendary black form, larger than any wolf the assembled soldiers had ever seen. Her fur blazed pure white, shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with inner light. Her eyes burned like twin suns, and from her wrist, where the claiming mark blazed like a silver sun, golden light radiated outward in waves that made the Moravian soldiers stumble back in instinctive terror. Lord Moravian's face had gone the color of old bone. "That's impossible," he whispered. You were nothing. A runt. A defect." Seraphine's wolf opened its jaws and spoke, not aloud, but directly into the minds of every wolf in the hall. "I am the mate of the Alpha King. I am the mother of his heirs. I am the light that burns away the darkness." She lunged. Moravian tried to raise his dagger, but she was faster. Impossibly fast, a blur of white and gold. Her jaws closed around his wrist, and the snap of breaking bone echoed through the hall. The poisoned blade clattered to the floor. The Moravian soldiers rushed toward her. The great hall doors exploded inward. Kalen burst through in full wolf form, his black fur swallowing the light, his golden eyes blazing with unholy fire. Behind him poured his loyal wolves, a tide of teeth and fury that crashed into the Moravian forces like a wave breaking on rocks. But Seraphine did not need saving. She tore through the soldiers who reached her white fur painting red, her massive form moving with a grace that belied its size. Every wolf who faced her fell. Every blade that sought her flesh found only golden light that burned like the sun itself. Ravenna shifted, her famous black wolf lunging toward Seraphine with a snarl of hatred. Seraphine caught her by the throat. For a long moment they stood frozen, the false queen and the true one, locked in a grip that would decide everything. "You called me a pet," Seraphine's voice echoed in Ravenna's mind. "You mocked me. You drugged my mate. You tried to steal my throne and murder my child." Her jaws tightened. "You failed." She threw Ravenna across the hall, the black wolf crashing into the stone wall with a yelp of pain. Ravenna shifted back to human form, crumpled and broken, her eyes wide with the terror of someone who had just realized they were utterly outmatched. Seraphine turned to find Kalen standing before her. He had shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, and blood spattering his face from the battle. But his eyes, those golden eyes, held nothing but awe. "You..." He seemed unable to form words. "Your wolf?" Seraphine shifted back as well, the transformation flowing through her with easy grace. She stood before him, her white hair cascading around her shoulders like moonlight made solid. "My wolf was waiting," she said softly. "Waiting for you. Waiting for our children. Waiting for me to stop being ashamed of who I am." Kalen reached for her, his hands trembling as they cupped her face. "You are magnificent," he breathed. "You have always been magnificent. I was just too blind to see the truth." "Then see it now." She tilted her head, baring her throat to him, the ancient gesture of a wolf offering herself to her mate. "Claim me properly," she said. "Complete what you started. Make me yours, and let me make you mine." Kalen's eyes blazed gold. He leaned down and pressed his lips to the spot where her neck met her shoulder. She felt his teeth graze her skin, felt the bond between them pulse with desperate need. When he bit down, the world exploded. The mate bond roared to completion with a force that drove them both to their knees. Seraphine cried out as Kalen's essence poured into her. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of his soul laid bare for her to see. She saw the night of the tournament through his eyes, not the hollow puppet she had witnessed from the shadows, but the creeping horror of the drug taking hold, the desperate struggle of his wolf trying to break free, the moment of brief, terrified clarity when he had turned toward the eastern archway and felt her, felt their bond screaming in warning before the poison dragged him back under. She felt his anguish when he woke 3 days later with her scent fading from his world. Felt the way his wolf had howled every night, clawing at the inside of his mind, driving him toward madness with the need to find her. Felt the crushing despair every time a search party returned empty-handed. And she felt his love, vast and boundless and unconditional. A love that had never wavered. A love that had torn a kingdom apart rather than accept a false mate. A love that saw her not as a runt or a pet or a servant, but as the most precious soul in his entire existence. When she could bear no more, Seraphine pulled back and pressed her own lips to his throat. "My turn," she whispered. Her teeth sank into his flesh. Kaelin shuddered as the bond reversed, as her essence flowed into him. He saw himself through her eyes, not the distant, untouchable king, but the man who had knelt in moonlit gardens and sworn she was beautiful. The man who had trembled when he touched her face. The man who had made her believe, for the first time in her life, that she was worthy of love. He felt her heart break when he chose Ravenna. Felt the way she had curled around her belly in the darkness, protecting their child while her world collapsed. Felt the fierce, stubborn love that had refused to die even when she believed he had abandoned her. And he felt her strength, quiet and relentless, forged in a lifetime of being underestimated. The strength that had carried her through exile, the strength that had walked into a room full of enemies to save 43 strangers, the strength that had transformed her wolf from something small and hidden into something radiant and unstoppable. When they finally broke apart, both of them were weeping. "My queen," Kaelin breathed. "My king," Seraphine answered. Around them, wolves began to howl, not a sound of battle but of celebration, of triumph, of a true mate bond finally, completely, eternally sealed. In the weeks that followed, House Moravin faced justice. Lord Aldrich was executed for his crimes, his final moments spent begging for a mercy he had never shown to others. Chancellor Morcant, who had fed Kaelin the poisoned wine and whispered Ravenna's name into his drugged ears, was stripped of his rank and exiled to the frozen northern wastes. And Ravenna, broken and humiliated, her legendary wolf form diminished after her defeat at Seraphine's jaws, was given a choice: death or exile to the eastern territories she had once hoped to rule as queen. She chose exile. "Let her live with her failure," Seraphine said when Kaelin asked if she wanted harsher punishment. "Let her spend the rest of her days knowing that the pet she mocked now sits on the throne she tried to steal." The kingdom healed slowly but surely. The crops that had withered began to grow again. The wolves who had grown restless under a fractured bond settled into peace, and the people of Velmora welcomed their true queen with a joy that still surprised her. "They mocked me once," Seraphine thought as she walked through the market square, accepting flowers from children and blessings from elders. "They called me runt, defect, pet. Now they call me queen." On a warm summer evening, as the sun set over Valdros in shades of gold and crimson, Seraphine gave birth to twins. A boy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's golden eyes, and a wolf form that shimmered between black and white, as if unable to decide which parent to honor. A girl, with silver-white fur that blazed with inner light even in her first shift, and a cry so powerful that wolves across the city lifted their heads in instinctive response. Kaelin held his children with tears streaming down his face, his warrior's hands impossibly gentle. "Thank you," he whispered to Seraphine, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed, "for fighting for us, for believing, even when I gave you every reason not to." Seraphine reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the claiming mark on his throat, the mark that matched the one on her wrist, both now healed into beautiful silver crescents that proclaimed their bond to all who saw them. "I never stopped believing," she said softly. "Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other." Kaelin leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. Always, he agreed. In this life, and every life that follows. You are my heart, Seraphine, my mate, my home. Outside their window, the wolves of Velmora lifted their voices in a chorus of joy. And in the great tapestry of the kingdom's history, a new chapter was woven. The story of a servant girl with a wolf too small to matter, until it wasn't. Of an alpha king who tore apart his realm to find his true love. Of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics or even the cruelest twists of fate. They had laughed at her once. They called her a pet. They were not laughing anymore. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.